Hey guys, this is Ben, and this is going to be a pretty different video, because the topic is going to be just way off the charts, randomness, and I have one guy who's even discussing something with me on something else, but I'm going to try to keep that discussion going at the same time. But anyway, I'm going to talk about generally two subjects in this video. I mean, this really should be two videos, but it's just like there's so much to cover. I don't know how to even make it two videos. It's ridiculous. So what I'm going to do is look at a lot of things in politics that people say, and I just called it political fallacies. And then we're going to take a look at the supernatural, sort of the second part of this. So the question will be, how quickly can I get through this? Alright. So first let's take a look at the political fallacies. The first one that I found was, this one I'm bringing it up first because it was new to me and it was really fascinating when I heard about it. It was called toxic masculinity. Have you heard of toxic masculinity? The idea is that women are morally superior to men, and there was a tweet I think was featured on the Tucker Carlson show. Toxic masculinity is killing us. That the real problem with violence in the world today is men. It's always men committing the violence, and almost all crime is committed by men, and so women are morally superior to men. Therefore, masculinity is killing us. Alright. So, first of all, the first fallacy you recognize when someone talks about this toxic masculinity fallacy is it's special pleading. In other words, they cherry pick examples where men are worse than women, but they might leave out examples where, men do good things. So, that's what Tucker went for. He went for the obvious special pleading fallacy. What about all the times violence is stopped? What about anytime there's been a madman on the rampage or violent people, or there's been a danger to people, who does good violence to stop it? Well, that's also always the men. So then you can make an argument like, are the women just, is their inaction, is that really a good thing, I mean, so that's, that at least muddies the water and makes the thing more gray. But that wasn't really what interested me, because that was like kind of the obvious, low-hanging fruit. What was interesting to me is the question of, and this was the real fallacy. It was that the concept is that because women are morally superior to men, and let's just grant that, a lot of people don't want to grant that, but let's just grant that's true, that women are morally superior to men. Does that mean that, let's put it this way, that women are more virtuous than men? Women are more virtuous than men. Okay. Does that mean that femininity is virtue, and that to be more virtuous is to be more feminine? Do you see that? In other words, I guess I would read this as a false dilemma fallacy, In other words, the question is, well, what if there's a third option of God? In other words, are women God? And just because women are better than men, that doesn't mean that women are perfect. You see what I'm saying? Are women God? Just because, in other words, just because women are morally more virtuous than men, that doesn't mean that being female is the same thing as being virtuous. That would just mean that women in general are doing better, but that wouldn't mean that they are virtue. So, that was the first one that I found interesting, responding to this guy. So, that's the one, I want to take a look at that one. Now, the other one that's really popular today is this whole freedom of speech question. And it seems to be the best example we can talk about is, interestingly enough, it's come to a head on this whole transgender issue. And so, like, in other words, if I don't use your correct gender pronouns, or if I have a problem with using your correct gender pronouns, then I'm creating an environment where a transgender person doesn't feel like they fit in and like they're accepted. And then transgenders have a really high suicide rate. Okay? And so the argument is that we should ban freedom of speech, and we should have, at least in special cases like this, laws in place to stop, so in other words, like if someone wants to be called a he when they're really a she, or something, when they're biologically a she, but they want to be called a he, then we should call them a he, or whatever, flip-flop, whatever. The thing is, this is an argument against the First Amendment, against freedom of speech, that we need to rescind the First Amendment. We should take away freedom of speech. Now, freedom of speech has limitations. I don't know exactly what they are. As I understood it, there are things you just can't say in certain situations because of, like, the imminent danger that you're causing. So that would be the argument in this case. That in this case, in other words, so like you can't say bomb on an airplane, you can't say fire in a movie theater. That's because saying something like that, it has such a direct effect. Now, the flip-flop of that is, if you can't say things that might hurt someone's feelings ever, then you have no freedom of speech. And so the question is, like, well, where do you, like, in other words, like, we're not talking about tricking people into doing something dangerous, in a situation. In other words, when you're in a movie theater and someone says fire, there's an understanding that we all have to get up and leave, because that's just how that works. Like, you can't question that or debate with that person at all. We all just have to act in a mob mentality sense and just get up and leave. And that this could be, detrimental for someone to trick you in that way. Who knows what dangerous things could happen, in an emergency event. So, like, this is the issue. And so, hopefully I've explained it before I move on to, like, what I think about it, but I'll go ahead and move on. When it comes to this issue of transgenders committing suicide, the thing is at what point are we going to, in other words, how far do you carry this logic? Because what people fail to realize is freedom of speech is always dangerous. It's perhaps the most dangerous freedom that we have. So, like, Adolf Hitler was democratically elected. By a majority, duly elected. It's what the people wanted. It was popular. In other words, dangerous ideas cause dangerous movements. And so, to ban certain speech as dangerous speech because it's just spreading ideas that might lead to problems for people, like this kind of talk would lead to, in other words, like, what they're saying is, if you say something that hurts someone's feelings, they may commit suicide. Okay? Well, that kind of talk, I mean, like, you would have to ban the Ku Klux Klan, you would have to ban neo-Nazis, you would have to ban any sort of hate group that spreads information that's hateful, because all of those groups ultimately have the potential, the neo-Nazis have the potential to take over America, because the Nazis did it, and they did it using freedom of speech. So, like, ideas are dangerous, and in other words, like, there's this dichotomy between safety and freedom. And you can't really have it both ways. You can't have freedom and safety. As soon as you as soon as you allow freedom for the populace, you lose safety. So, for example, in America, they tried a new experiment where they said, okay, let's have freedom of religion. You can believe whatever religion you want. So, like in the northern colonies, you were required by law to be a Puritan. And in the southern colonies, you were required by law to be Church of England. America gets started under the Bill of Rights, under the First Amendment, you have freedom of religion. And what happens is you have an explosion of religion, and a lot of cults get started. And cult groups like the Mormons or the Oneida community often involve sexual abuse. And the whole way these got started was just through allowing people to believe whatever they want to believe. You know, for the freedoms in the First Amendment, you know, you can protest the government, you can assemble, you can, you know, say what you want, you can believe what you want, and I forgot what the other one is. But, like, the point is, you can have your church, you can have your group, you can believe your wacky beliefs, you can spread your ideas, and this led to a lot of people being hurt in a lot of ways. And so, for example, in other countries, they just ban cult groups. They just say, this is dangerous, we're just not going to allow you. And they ban these groups without any evidence that they're actually hurting anyone, but just because the religious ideas they're spreading there are deemed to be nonsense and cult-like. And see, that cuts to the core of what I'm talking about. Like, in other words, people who, like, all of the arguments you're making in favor of, you know, forcing people or fining people for not using the correct gender pronouns could be made in defense of banning cult groups. So, like, you know, look at all the people who were sexually abused by cult groups. You know, we can't have this anymore, and there goes freedom of religion. You know, so, like, I could, you know, you could ban neo-Nazi groups, you could ban political groups, you could ban any group. Anytime someone says something that could potentially lead to actual physical harm for another person. And the fact of the matter is, like, that's a real reality with a lot of different speech. So, like, the protections of freedom of speech would be pretty lost. So, under the Nazis, for example, you didn't have the freedom to criticize the government. And there was one example of one woman who she had actually visited Nazi Germany before Nazi Germany was really infamous, you know, back when Adolf Hitler was being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize and getting Time Magazine Man of the Year and best buddy of, you know, like FDR and stuff. But like, before they were the evil Nazis, they were like, people thought it was like the best place ever. But this woman, she had visited Nazi Germany and lived there for a while, and she lived with like a young couple, and there was an older man who lived with them, and the reason he lived with them was because he had gotten in trouble for publicly criticizing the government. And so he had to live with this young couple that was very, you know, pro everything with the government. Well, like, he went out to a bar one night, and he had kept his mouth shut and stayed to himself, but he went out to a bar one night and just, like, he couldn't keep it in, and he got on a rant against the Nazi government. And they, you know, the woman said that, like, the young married couple, they were just like, oh, we just love Hitler, and we just love the Nazis. They've just improved our country so much, and they were just great, great, wonderful. And that guy was kind of biting his lip. Well, one night he went out and, like, you know, criticized the government at a bar, and he vanished. He vanished the next day. In other words, like, you didn't have freedom of religion. He was put with those people because they were to keep an eye on him and to help straighten him out. So you didn't have not just freedom of religion, but freedom of speech. He was just one guy. He wasn't even a dangerous group. But, like, from the Nazi point of view, we need to be united. Disunity was going to take them down, and they had come out of the Great Depression, and, like, their country had been in a horrible situation, and the Nazis had brought this intense unity and togetherness and cooperation to their government. People were working together, and it had improved society. I mean, just think about all the dissension and the disagreement, and, like, think about all the political hatred that goes on, and the factions and the infighting, and the different groups that just, I mean, do we really need two different political parties? Can't we just like figure out what the right thing to do is and just do that instead of having these two groups just argue and fight to where like, you know, certain people would just argue in defense of a certain political party no matter what? Like, wouldn't society be better off if we didn't have that? You know, and people abuse their power. So, you know, I mean, that we get things like the Clintons who, they don't even care. They just toot the, you know, the Democrat horn, and the Clintons are just, you know, the big shots or whatever. Well, can't we do away with that by doing away with political parties and teams and all this competitive nonsense, you know, and just like, we'll all just get together and we'll all just do the right thing. You know what I mean? And anyone who has a problem with what's going on in the government, you know, they'll just, you know, they're just ridiculous and we'll just haul them away, you know. And of course, I don't know what happened to that guy. He probably got exterminated. But anyway, you get the point. This is the point I'm making. Safety and freedom can't coexist. You have to have one or the other. I guess I can make the point another way. If you look up the Justice League cartoon, there is an episode of the Justice League cartoon where they go to a parallel universe, and I think it's on, you can watch it on, let's see, the parallel universe. In the parallel universe, Lex Luthor ran for United States presidency, and he won. And he was the same super evil Lex Luthor that you had in the regular universe. And so, if it all turned out to be a big scam, and let's see, I can't find it. I'm looking for the episode. Okay, I think it was season 1. Hold on. Yeah. No, hold on, I'm looking for it. Well, anyway, in the parallel universe, the Justice League finds out that Lex Luthor he was made president, but it was all for like evil reasons, and so it got down to the point where like Superman had to decide like, should I stop Lex Luthor or not? And he decides to take down the presidency and it's called A Better World. It's a 2-part episode. It's episode 11 and 12 of season 2, or 37 and 38. It says, following the death of the Flash, if the Flash died in that other parallel universe, the Justice Lords, they launch an assault on the White House, where Superman kills President Lex Luthor. 2 years later, the Lords now rule over the planet with an iron fist. Batman discovers the dimension where the regular Justice League inhabits, and they consider their counterparts naive, but wishing to spread the order to the newly discovered parallel universe, they cross over and trap the Justice League in a force field. They then take their places in a quest to make this Earth like their own. Alright, so anyway, you get the idea. And it comes down to a fundamental question, like, and it's brought up a lot in I guess, it's called the Timverse. It's like the Superman cartoons that are done by Bruce Timm. But like, this question of freedom versus safety. Like, they say they created a world where there's no crime, where there's no murder. But there's also, if you even so much as, they had an example in the movie, in the show, where like a guy gets upset because he's overcharged at the restaurant and he wants to cause a fuss and cause a scene. This paddy wagon just pulls right up and hauls him off. So, you know, you can create a world where you won't have any murder, you won't have any crime, but to create that world, you have to restrict freedom of expression, freedom of thought. Lois Lane in the parallel universe, you know, she's a news reporter. She hates it, and Superman basically has her on lockdown in like a penthouse estate, but like she doesn't like it. There's no freedom of the press. People aren't allowed to think for themselves. So this question that arises is between safety and freedom. And so the point I want to make is that how do you decide which is more important? Do you take away people's freedoms, or do you value safety first? And what I would argue, at least in this video, is that you cannot, from an atheist perspective, defend the notion of freedom. And it's interesting because atheists really like their freedom. They really like the freedom to, they tend to be people who really like freedom. But how on earth can they defend it? Anyway, let me see if I can. I'm taking my jacket off because I got hot. I'm hot. Okay. Alright. So, you get the idea. And so, the real debate is between a utilitarian principle versus some other system of ethics that's, not based on utilitarianism or not. In other words, utilitarianism says you do evil things because the ends justify the means. So, like, you take away people's basic freedoms because of all the safety. Because you can't allow murder. You can't allow crime. If you could end all crime by taking away all freedom, would you do it? That's the question. And or is it better to have a world with crime that allows freedom? It's a political question. And so you can't really justify in other words, like, you can't condemn utilitarianism without belief in God, would be my point. So when it comes to this transgender debate thing, I would argue that our modern sense that, we need to get rid of freedom of speech is just a byproduct of the lack of religious thinking that our culture is slowly embracing. Even though atheism isn't exactly on the rise in the world today, we don't think religiously. Like, we turn the religious part of our brain off, and it's part of our culture. It's called secularism. And it's even the way it's changing our culture is called secularization. And a lot of sociologists, that's right where they're at. America is a secularized culture where religion has to do with certain things in your life, basically how your feelings and your personal experiences, and, at church, and you close the doors of the church and you leave that in there, and you come out, and then you think in another way. You don't bring God into anything, so therefore you would basically be an atheist in everything else. So, like, that's secularism. And the point is, this anti-free speech movement, this idea that we have to take away basic rights and do bad things, like, to take away people's basic rights to think what they want, to say what they want, and have whatever wacky group they want. We take away those on the basis of the ends justifying the means. That's a utilitarian position, and it makes perfect sense if there is no God. Because if there is no God, then it's just you and me protecting the world from all of the bad guys, and we are not God. We have to do desperate things to fix the problems of the world as best we can, and we have to make probability assessments about what's going to happen and take our best shot at the best possible outcome. Whereas from a Christian perspective, it would be quite different. So one example I can use from a Christian perspective would be the famous Christian martyr. Her name is Felicitas. In the 2nd century AD, so in the 100s, this woman was an evangelist. So that means she converted a lot of people to Christianity. A lot of people were being converted to Christianity by this woman. The government didn't like it. And so they got her, and she had 7 sons, and they said they gave her a chance to renounce Christ, and then if she didn't, they'd kill a son. And each son, they killed her son, they gave her a chance to renounce, killed her son, gave her a chance to renounce. And every single time, she was like, nah, I'm not renouncing. And then they killed her too. So from a utilitarian perspective, she should have just renounced Christ. She could go back to preaching Christ secretly, or like work within the government to like change things or whatever. But the death of her 7 sons is just not as important as her witness, as her being true to like her testimony or whatever. The ends justify the means. Whereas her, from a Christian perspective, it's totally different. Because from a Christian perspective, she was never in a situation that God didn't allow her to be in with intention and forethought. And therefore, God never intended her to deny Christ. And so, her sons may live, her sons may die, they're in God's hands, not those people's hands. God could save them if He wanted to, just like He saved Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. God, if she really believes in God, then like that's what she believes. He could save them, so she's going to do the right thing and just hope for the best, And so that's a Christian perspective: is you don't make utilitarian judgments. You believe that there's a plan, there's a God out there, and we don't have to give up hope. So like, you try to save everyone from dying, you try to stop crime, but also without getting, doing evil things. Because God never meant for us to, take away people's basic freedoms just to end crime. So that, you get the point. So what I would say is kind of what I've said on that. Anyways, another one, here's a different one that bugs me a lot of times. It's socialism, the idea that socialism will solve tyranny. This is something people always talk about, capitalism creates a tyrannical situation of like aristocrats or the bourgeois. So like the wealthy private capitalists, the people who just have a bunch of money and they just invest in things and they get more money and they don't really provide any benefit to society. They're just capitalists. So the issue there is that the free market is actually designed to alleviate tyrannical oppression. So in other words, if you don't like your treatment, you do business with someone else. So like, let's say that, your only option is to work for some rich guy, some bourgeois. But let's say he's ripping you off. He's treating you bad for some reason. Well, all you gotta do is, you can go to the other bourgeois down the road who would love to have you. Right? Because these guys how do these guys make money? They don't just fart it out, right? They make it off the backs of the laborers, right? And that's what the socialists and the communists believe, right? It's made off the backs of the laborers. So therefore the bourgeois compete for your labor, and that makes them treat you better. So the only way you can get rid of this free market protection is when you have the government, create rules that limit your ability to do business and trade and switch and swap. So anyway, also in our capitalist system we don't just have a free market system, although it's more limited than a lot of people say. These restrictions, what government restrictions on free market, what they do is they create problems. People can't get jobs, they can't do business. We also have democracy. So like the actual government guys, they're voted in and out. Now see, the thing about socialism is it gives all the power to the government. It gives all the money to the government. So in other words, like, it makes the government the ultimate aristocrat. It makes the government the ultimate bourgeois. You replace an all-powerful bourgeois with an even more all-powerful state. And your only protection against tyranny is democracy. Well, you had democracy before. You also had the free market. You took away one of the protections against tyranny. So to say that, like, in other words, like, what you're doing is you're saying, alright, we'll give all of our everything to the government, and then the government will just protect us. Well, I mean, like, all you're doing is removing one of the protections. So the only way you could really get around what I'm saying here is you could say, well, we can't vote in or out the bourgeois, like people, you can't just remove the bourgeois with like an election process. To some degree that's true, but you can, they have to earn your dollar. because you're not going to do business with them if you can do business with another bourgeois. Alright, so anyway, that's just not true. The other one you hear a lot is people talk about, well, in communist countries, there's all these horrible things happen. You know, there are millions dead, exterminations, and sometimes you have communist supporters who don't deny it, but they just say that communism hasn't been tried correctly. And so this really bothers me, because the same people oftentimes, they hate Nazis. And it's like, well, how would you feel if I told you that, you know, Nazism hasn't been tried correctly, or fascism hasn't been tried correctly? That it really would have worked, it just wasn't tried correctly. You would spout off about the millions dead and you wouldn't care. So, like, that's an essential point. Okay? In other words, like, most people decide that fascism is a bad system. They don't know for sure that it's a bad system, but they're not going to risk it on the basis that look how bad it went last time. Why can't we do the same thing with communism? Honestly. Why is that ridiculous? Okay. Now, interesting, like, what they do sometimes is, like, you actually get Holocaust deniers, but in commie form. So, like, one example of there were farmers in the Ukraine who refused to go work on government farms, and they were forced, there was forced starvation, so they wouldn't give up their land and go work on the government farms. See, private property is illegal under a communist system, under socialism. So, like, you can have personal property, but it's not private. In other words, the government gives it to you and they decide if you need it or don't need it. So it's public, but it's personal, but it's not totally private. You can, like, the shirt on your back is your personal property, but it's not your private property, because the government gave it to you and they decide when you need a new one, you know, or your car or your house, etc. So, like, you're a farmer, you got to go work on a government farm. You can't just say, this is my land and the government can't take it. You can't have private property. So this is called the Holodomor, and about 6 million people died in these forced starvations. So what communists say, defenders, is they actually will claim that they will deny that it even happened, and say that was a natural famine. That didn't happen, you know. And famines happen in the U.S. Like I saw one where they said the Dust Bowl happened in the U.S. and nobody claimed it was the government's fault. Okay, well, so that doesn't, you know. In other words, like, this is what's called shifting of the burden of proof. Like, in other words, there's evidence already, and it's generally accepted that the Holodomor happened, and it was a forced starvation. There's even a monument in Washington, D.C. to the forced starvation of 6 million Ukrainians. But you tell me that, like, I have to prove to you that it happened. No. There's tons of evidence. There's tons of support for it. If you're going to debunk all that, then you have to prove to me why the generally accepted story is a fraud and a fake. In other words, this is a conspiracy theory. If I come to you with some conspiracy theory, you are under no obligation to believe me until I provide evidence. So in other words, like, if I want to say that the Holodomor is a made-up conspiracy, then, like, I have to provide you evidence for that. I can't just, there's no reason for anyone to accept you. You know, other than, you know, in other words, like, if you're going to debunk all the evidence, you have to actually debunk the evidence. And think about it from the Nazi perspective. Like, would you accept a Holocaust denier? Because it's basically the same thing. Okay? You know, you're a Holodomor denier. Alright. Now here's one from the right that bugs me. I think, what's her name? The blonde-headed woman, the long, tall, long-legged woman with the long hair and the long face. She's, I cannot think of her name. She's a big Trump supporter. I can't think of her name. But anyway, she says this, multiculturalism doesn't work. It's this idea that, you know, we don't need a multicultural society. That, you know, it's dangerous to have multiple cultures mixed in one melting pot. And, you know, sort of a restriction on immigration and that kind of thing. And again, hopefully by this point, if you're with me after 35 minutes, is like, this is utilitarianism. This is straight utilitarianism. This is straight freedom versus safety. You know, that like people shouldn't have the freedom to just live next door because of the possible danger that the clash of ideas would cause too much unrest and probably crime in the community. Like, okay, this is literally, this is something that you know, this is just like the people who want to say that, you know, you got to ban misgendering. So yeah, we don't got to say any more about that because I ranted about it. Here's one. Trump is a Nazi. This one bugs me because you're just begging the question, like, can you provide actual evidence that he's a Nazi? Just because he does things that, like, some Nazis approve of doesn't mean that he's a Nazi. I mean, that's ridiculous. You know, or even if Nazis want to claim him, you know, that doesn't mean he's a Nazi. That doesn't mean he's a Nazi. And yeah, you know, there's a lot of people on the left that are like, whatever, he's a Nazi because he's not anti-Nazi enough. All right. Let's think about this from the other perspective, okay, since you can't wrap your mind around the simple concept. Would you accept the same excuses you give? In other words, you say he's a Nazi, and people say, well, can you provide evidence? And you provide really crappy evidence that really are just excuses for you holding your position. Would that work if the shoe was on the other foot for you? In other words, what if someone said, like they used to say so much, that Barack Obama is a Muslim and supports ISIS and Hamas? And they gave really, really scant, crappy evidence for that. How would you feel then? Okay. Alright, let's see. And here's one. Religion should stay out of government. Now, the thing is, let's just get started. That is a position on religion. There is no non-answer to religious questions. So, like, you can't fully separate religion and government. I'll give you an example. 9/11, September 11th, 2001, and these hijackers hijacked the plane and they destroyed World Trade Center. Okay, that's amazing that they actually destroyed the World Trade Center. These huge buildings I saw in movies and pictures forever, they're gone now. But like, they believe that God Almighty approved of that and wanted them to do that. We hunted them down, or if, you know, actually they all died in it, but like the people that were behind them and behind that, we hunted them down to kill them and arrest them and whatever. And we certainly eventually got Osama bin Laden, who claimed to be the mastermind behind it. So here's the thing. There's no way, the fact that we're hunting them down and killing them, that we hunted down Osama bin Laden and killed him, he claimed that God told him to do that. So there's no way that you're not taking the position that his religion is wrong. Like, there's no way, like, the government is keeping its hands out. They are saying, your religion is wrong. You know, and I brought this up before, and people said, well, no, we're just saying he's crazy. And it's like, well, his religion would still be wrong if he was crazy, you know, like, that's absurd. But the bottom line is, like, you're banning his religious belief, because, you know, in other words, we let a lot of freedom of religion go in this country, but, like, we do draw the line somewhere. Anyway. And you can, and you know, the idea is like, you can preach your nonsense, you just can't actually blow people up and justify it with your nonsense. So we're actually banning the blowing of people up, but the thing is, like, if God really did tell him to do that, then it's wrong for us to hunt him down and kill him. Okay, now the next point is, so my point there is you can't fully separate religion and government. Now my next point is one that's really contentious, but I've talked about it so much before, is there is no non-religious moral basis. In other words, all politics ultimately boils down to law. Law ultimately boils down to concepts of right and wrong. Right and wrong, you know, ultimately boils down to morality. Morality cannot exist without a moral lawgiver. And an absolute moral lawgiver because morality just doesn't spring out of nothing for no reason at all. If you have two rocks sitting in a pond, there is no sense in which of good and evil. They're just there. You know, as soon as you move to a position where you say, this is the way things ought to be, and this is the way things ought not be, this is the way things should be, this is the way things should not be, this is good, this is bad, that comes from a being, because it has to do with intention and desire and purpose. So, I don't know how you can not be a being, a personal being, but also have desires. So, there has to be a moral lawgiver, and the moral lawgiver must be an absolute ultimate moral lawgiver. Otherwise, how will we decide which, if we just let people decide, well, people disagree. So, there would be no moral law. So, you can't have politics and law unless you have God. Unless you have an absolute ultimate moral lawgiver who decides what's right and wrong for all people. So there, we won't go into that anymore. Now, I'll hasten to say that moral knowledge, from my Christian perspective, my Christian worldview, moral knowledge is accessible to the non-religious. But certain particular values cannot be justified. So, hold on just a second. We back. Alright, so that's my point. Is from a Christian perspective, I'm not making the point that the non-religious have no concept of right and wrong, or they don't know the difference between good and evil, and that kind of thing. I'm not saying that, because that's just not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches that all people know that they're sinners, and they have this knowledge, and we're conscious of it. So that's just not what we're saying. What we're saying is there's no way morality could exist. In other words, it exists, but logically, how could it exist if there's no God? Now, what I would say is certain values cannot be justified without a religious basis. So in other words, we talked about the value of our basic American freedoms. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech. You cannot justify those values without the existence of God. So you're just going to in other words, all of these arguments from all of these people, you see the left, and they're fighting with each other, and the Democrats and the left, and the whole argument is a big part of it is freedom of speech needs to be banned. We need to ban hate. We need to have hate, hate speech needs to be banned. And they reference actual, these transgender people commit suicide, and if, can't we just not treat them like crap and just, have a law that, some sort of protection for their feelings, and, it's hard enough for them as it is, yada yada. And the thing is, there are plenty of atheists and people, maybe on the left and even on the right, who aren't religious, who argue against that, but they don't really have an argument. They just say, that's ridiculous, that's ridiculous, that's ridiculous. You want to ban freedom of speech, how dare you? This is sacred. Well, they're questioning the sacred. All you're doing is saying, you don't like it. Well, good for you, they like it. So who cares what, can you back up what you think at all? And my point is, you can't back up a criticism of utilitarian thinking without a reference to the belief in God. Alright, and then I would just add that Christianity actually provides a basis for separation of church and state, but within limitations. So, you can't have totally separated church and state. You're not gonna have any law if you just let people, whatever religious belief you want to believe, you can do. That would be a completely lawless society. but the basis, Christianity created the concept of separation of church and state. At first, the concept was more of, it started with separation of church and state. That was the original idea, but it moved to freedom of religion, which was a more advanced concept that really hasn't taken hold everywhere. So, in other words, like, at first the idea was that the government and the religion should be separate entities. But then it moved to people should be able to believe or disbelieve whatever they want. So, the issue, if you go back, to John Wycliffe in the late Middle Ages, actually, one of the earliest, maybe the first Protestant reformer, before Martin Luther, before the printing press. His position was that the church is just amassing political power and that this was not what God intended. God didn't intend the church to acquire wealth and political power and decide who is a king and a queen. And I can't go into too much into the history about how that came to be and this tension between separation of church and state. But I guess the issue is that church and state were always one entity throughout human history. Religion and government were the same entity. So like if you go back to ancient Babylon and the first ever cities the world ever built, at the center of every city was the temple. And the priest and the king were the same person. This throws us for a loop because we have a medieval Christian mindset where there's a separate church and a separate, what they called secular government, worldly government. So like, the distinction happened because under Christianity, when it emerged, in other words, like in the ancient world, people said the reason I'm in charge is because the gods put me in charge. And every kingdom was like that. They all claimed that. So, and then if you refuse to worship the gods, then you were a traitor to the government. It was just one entity. There was no separation. So, to tell someone, that you're a citizen of a nation or a city or an empire, but you don't believe in the gods of that empire, they would look at you like you don't think the sky's blue or something. Let's see. So the way it moved forward was what happened was Christianity became a religion under the Roman Empire, and it was illegal to be a Christian because as a Christian you refuse to worship the Roman gods. But the Christians also believed that they should obey the government. So this basically meant in every area you obey the government, but obviously you can't be a Christian and obey the government in every single area because it's illegal to be a Christian. So the church emerged, it was a separate entity. And so it was a difficult thing when Christianity actually got political power. It got political power first under the Roman Emperor Constantine, and part of the problem was he didn't know the beast that he had, what he was unleashing. Christianity had a furious desire for purity that just did not exist under the ancient religions. The ancient religions were intolerant, but they weren't crazy about the details. So, there was a debate raging in the church at the time over the Trinity. And Constantine thought he resolved it by just saying, he came up with, a wishy-washy statement that just, didn't really satisfy anyone, and just said, the Trinity is like this, and there, I've solved it. And the evidence would seem to indicate that he wasn't really a Christian, maybe. But that didn't fly. And so what happened was one side, the Arians, the people who deny the Trinity and say that Jesus is just a created being, they weaseled their way into the powers of government and into the family of the next in line. And so they began a persecution of the Nicene Christians who defend the concept of Jesus as fully God, fully man. Which is traditionally what the church had always taught. But, it kept going, and then finally under Theodosius, so in other words, Christianity was persecuted, and then once it got political power, the Arian Christians the persecution kept going, and so the Arian Christians just persecuted the Nicene Christians. Well, then finally under Theodosius, which was, I think he might have been actually the last Roman emperor of the whole empire, he was a fervently Nicene Christian emperor, and so he used religious force to force people to do what he wanted. And he banned the wrong forms of Christianity. One of the things that the Christian emperors did is they started appointing who was what bishop of what church. And so this is how the push and pull got started. The real debate is was Christianity a tool that was simply useful to the government for controlling of people, or was it inherent in Christianity to force people to be in one religion? Well, the thing is, Jesus taught very explicitly against religious violence, against spreading his kingdom by the sword. So you can't really go there. You would have to say that this is just a blight, and where some Christians, or people who at the very least claim to be Christians, did not behave in a Christian way. There was a rebellion in a part of the empire, and you got to understand the empire was falling apart in his day, and it was squashed, but there was a massacre. The soldiers went out of control and squashed the little rebellion with just massacring all the people in the city, and it was just a horrible, murderous thing. And so you have the famous event where a Christian bishop, I think it was Ambrose, of Milan, I think, and the emperor was in Milan at the time, and he said, you have to pray to God for forgiveness because under your government this horrible incident occurred. And he actually bowed down to, he took a while, but he actually made a public, he made a public profession. And so that just would never have occurred before then. And so throughout the Middle Ages, you have this push-pull, and there's sort of this long period of figuring out, how religion and government interact now. In other words, if you want to be a king or a ruler, and you want to call yourself a Christian, then you have to obey the Bible and do Christian things. But how on earth do you, in other words, if you want to be a baptized Christian, then how do you govern? Can you govern and just disagree with the church? Well, this became a problem. One of the problems that emerged in the Middle Ages, you had kings and queens who wanted to do all sorts of unchristian things, and the church said you can't do that. You can't. So the church had all kinds of rules, you can't make war on holy days, and then 3/4 of the year was holy days. So people would just they would just and they had good intentions behind it. They were you can't have multiple wives, but there were also some bad intentions behind it. They were if we don't approve of your marriage, then the children of that marriage aren't going to inherit the kingdom, because God is against your kingdom. And so, really, what came out of all of that was essentially the Protestant Reformation, where people said, okay, we're going to do our best to follow God, and this is what John Wycliffe wrote. He said, you have to decide for yourself whether or not you're following God. You can't just let the preacher decide that for you. And that was a big deal when he wrote that. There's a lot of push-pull back and forth. So, what happened was the Protestant Reformation happened because there were other disagreements within Christianity about people, because the Catholic Church had really corrupted the concept of salvation by that point. And so there was sort of religious rebelliousness where there were different churches popping up. So you started having Lutherans and Calvinists and Huguenots and blah, blah, blahs. And so what happened was the, let's see, the various kings and queens who wanted to make war to just take other people's land, power, and money, all of a sudden started doing that. And if the Catholic Church didn't like it, they would just say, well, I'm the other religion, and I'm attacking these people because, or flip-flop, they would say, I'm attacking them because they're not Catholic. You know, when in reality they just want to take their land and money. And it was always interesting, like the French king, he was always such a defender of Catholicism, but it seemed like the interests of the Catholic Church sure did line up with his interests. You know, like, it was always beneficial to him to defend the Catholic Church. Yeah, like, so that's what happened. So you have these, in the 1600s, you have these wars of religion. I think it's 15 and 1600s. You have wars of religion. It was bad. So people were making all these wars in the name of religion. So then you have the Treaty of Westphalia in what people call the Enlightenment, where they said, okay, get religion out of government. You can't use religious justification for, like, we're all going to shake hands at the table, and no more using religious justification for, like, making war, blah, blah, blah. It's called the Peace of Westphalia. So the problem with this is it didn't really fix anything. War now, after this, increased on a massive scale because now people were just making war however they saw fit. Whereas before, they had to give some kind of, at very least, they had to satisfy the Catholic Church. So the question is, did Christianity lead to more war and gain for greed and political power? Or it probably overall it acted, there are examples of religious violence and violence in the name of religion, but for the most part, Christianity really acted as a deterrent. It pushed it back. That's for the most part. You can name a few examples, like Charlemagne certainly, he beheaded pagans when he became king. And the Crusades are probably the one example you can give of violence that was religiously motivated. That's probably the one example. But really, for the most part, it's political people using religion to get what they want, and the church is, for the most part, acting as in opposition to that. But I think John Wycliffe was right. The secular king or queen has to act as, they have to judge for themselves whether or not they're following God. They can't let the church tell them whether or not they're following God. And if you really want to know why this was such a struggle, is it has to do with the system of revelation and the difference between the Protestant church and the Catholic church. So in the Catholic church, you have the Bible, but you also have the traditions of the church. And so they have this belief that, like, teachings that have been handed down from one generation to the next, they go back all the way to the apostles, are every bit as a revelation from God and from God's prophets and apostles. So if the apostles, if it's a tradition that the church has always held, that we're supposed to be doing X, and that you have to do, do penance if you sin, then, like, that's God's word. And so, in other words, like, the problem becomes, well, if that's the case, then you can't just go back to the Bible, read it for yourself, and figure out if you're really following God. You have to go to the church to get their traditional, what the church is teaching, because that's the authority. The interesting thing is, Christianity doesn't really work like that. I can't go into the epistemological basis for Christianity as a whole, but, like, it's not really supposed to work like that. You're supposed to be able to know for yourself if you're following God. And, will that produce anarchy? Only if there is no God. So anyway, so the question, I guess, becomes, like, is there separation of church and state under Christianity? Yes. The most powerful if you go back to the Bible and you go back to the teachings there, you can really find powerful basis for it that you can't find under atheism, and certainly not under Islam. But the best example is Jesus Christ on the cross. Jesus Christ is the one person who had every right to bring the hammer down and kill everyone for being so bad and naughty, and he didn't do that. Instead, he died for our sins. So in other words, this is a powerful affirmation of the right to be wrong. And when it comes to the separation of church and state, that's really what it boils down to. Do people have the right to be in the wrong? And from Jesus' perspective, absolutely yes. And so that means that from a Christian perspective on government, your Christianity will inform. In other words, our government, as a Christian, you should want a Christian government where the laws are based on Christian teachings. And the laws that we have are, even Barack Obama said it. He said they are can't think of the word he used, but it's a word that means when you take general principles and you expand them out into a more specific system of rules. So Confucius did this with Taoism. And Barack Obama said, the Jewish Christian tradition, codification, that's the word. Our laws today in America are just the codification of Judeo-Christian principles. He said that, before he was elected. The first time. But the point is, one of those principles is the right to be wrong. That people have the right to believe whatever they want to believe. And they don't have to be a Christian. So anyway, let's keep going. Here's one. We're back to the trans thing again, because people keep bringing up the trans thing. Is that we should accept whatever trans people say, about themselves. And I don't like that idea, because it's a question begging fallacy. You have to provide evidence that you are X before I accept that you're X, because the possibility that you're just crazy is possible. You may not be crazy. There may be something physically up with you that you're not fully male or fully female. There may be some issue in your brain or something with your chemistry, yada yada, blah blah blah. But until we have evidence that X exists, why should we believe that X exists? Just because you say X exists that is not good evidence, because crazy people exist. And the fact that trans people commit suicide at such a high rate is not a powerful evidence for this. Because, let's be honest, there are plenty of persecuted people in this world who don't commit suicide at these really high rates. Alright. Here's one. I don't know if we're towards... Ooh, okay. Religious. This is one I've taught about. I don't know if I ever made a video, but the people say that if you're religious, it's about gay rights. No one cares about gay rights anymore, I guess. But that you are against love because you are against gay marriage, or because you say homosexual sex is a sin. That means you're anti-love. Okay, this is fairly simple, but sometimes it's a struggle until you get the basic concept. It's just that as Christians, we don't have a problem with two men loving one another. We believe that it's a sin for two men not to love one another. We are supposed to love one another to the point of being willing to die for one another. We're supposed to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. And Jesus says the highest form of love is to, be willing to die for people. So and John says, this is how we know what love is, that Christ died for us and we ought to lay down our lives for others. And that if you say you love God but you don't love your brother, then you're a liar. Because there's no way you can love an invisible God, but you won't even love your visible brother. That's what John says in 1 John 4. So the point is, as Christians, we don't have a problem with love. What we have a problem with is we think that there's correct ways to express love. Sex is a way of expressing love that's designed just for a certain relationship in your life. But that doesn't mean that you don't love someone else. And a simple example would be fathers and sons, or fathers and daughters, or whatever, but we'll just use fathers and sons. A father loves his son, but that doesn't mean that he has sex with his son. And he doesn't have to ever have sex with his son. And you can be against father-son sex, but you can still be for father-son love. Anyway. Okay, minimum wage, the thing that I want to bring up this question of minimum wage, because people say, you know, we need to have minimum wage laws, or even now we're at like they want a basic income, is that what they call it? A standard basic income? Alright, so if you're in college and you're getting a college education, then the whole concept of you getting a college education is, I hate to use a big word, but it's the antithesis of minimum wage. In other words, like, the concept of minimum wage is like you can say, hey, I'll work for less. In other words, they don't want to hire you because you don't know how to do anything and because you suck. Or let's just back up and I'll defend it this way. The free market provides a protection against you getting ripped off as a worker, so that you will be paid what you are worth. How does it do this? If you are getting ripped off, you can go work for the other bourgeois. We talked about this, right? You can just go work for a different bourgeois. You know, if this bourgeois is not taking good care of you, then forget that bourgeois. I'll go work for the other bourgeois because he'll pay me a little more because I'm worth it. In other words, like if he's making $100,000 a year off your work and he's paying you 20, I'm sure there's some other bourgeois or some other capitalist down the road who'll pay you a little bit more. And what's going to happen is your pay's going to keep going up until you're getting paid, you know, what you're really worth to the guy. I mean, he's going to make some kind of profit. He's going to, you know, for his trouble. But like, you're not going to be getting ripped off. So anyway, here's the point. The only way you can really, just to add in, the only way you can really stifle that process of free market protection on workers is with the government coming in and making rules about you being able to switch and move and what kind of agreements you can enter into with your employer. Because if there's any kind of restriction on your ability to do that, then like that could screw you over. It needs the freedom for you to be able to switch. So anyway, if you are not valuable as an employee, then you need to become more valuable. So one of the simple ways you can become more valuable is by getting an education and training, by literally paying money to get an education so that you become more valuable. And then they will hire you because now you are more valuable because you have the education and the training. Correct? Yes! Ooh! Okay. Guys. Minimum wage is, think about this. A college education is a job where you make infinitely less than minimum wage. In other words, you're not only getting paid really poorly, you're actually paying a lot. In other words, think of minimum wage jobs as training, where you're of little value to the employer, to the bourgeois, but you're getting training and you're getting paid for it instead of paying thousands of dollars for it. And then you'll become more valuable in the future because you got a foot in the door by being willing to work for a little amount of money. And you say, well, how do people, they're not making enough to live on. Well, yeah, they're going to have someone help them in this process, which typically, they're young. And it's how they get the foot in the door. So, like, their parents are helping pay for stuff at that point. You say, well, what about people who just are super poor and they have no way, no one, they can't get ahead. Maybe they have some sort of disability, or maybe they're just like, they're orphans and there's no parents to take care of. Well, that's what we have charities for, or some sort of system to help the really, really poor. But, a minimum wage law is not just for the really, really poor, it's for everyone. And what it does is it hurts people from being able to get their foot in the door. Anyway. Okay, I would want to say that I already did a video on helping the poor with Marxism. So let's go to this supernatural question. Alright, so we're going to talk about some stuff I've never talked about before in videos at this point. And boy, this is a long video. But I'm going to talk about the supernatural. And what I want to do is I want to criticize and refute naturalism, and I want to defend the concept of the supernatural. And the first thing I want to say is that I'm not defending the entire grab bag of superstitions that people have. In other words, people believe in a lot of stuff. They believe in the Loch Ness Monster, alien visitations, knew a kid who believed he was a werewolf, reincarnation, karma, and FYI, a lot of people don't realize that like yoga is part of the Hindu religion. As far as I understand it, you have bad karma from all the bad things you've done in this life or past lives, and you actually are supposed to suffer by doing the yoga to pay for the bad things you did. So it's a religious practice for getting rid of your bad karma. You're not just breathing it out, or like, it's not like in Christianity where you get a better attitude or something, or God shows you the light or whatever. It's, you need to suffer to get rid of the bad karma. And my point is that, like, I'm not defending the entire grab bag of superstition. So in other words, you're going to come at me and you're going to say, like, well, that's unscientific. Science can debunk all these supernatural beliefs. Like, well, that's great. I'm not defending all supernatural beliefs. I'm defending very specific supernatural beliefs that cannot be debunked and actually can be proven true. The first one we're going to go to is this, where Plato was. They say all of philosophy is footnotes to Aristotle and Plato. Well, right here we're going to go with Plato with a very simple question from Platonic philosophy. Are you ready? How much does the number 7 weigh? How much does the number 7 weigh? And it's not like I'm the first one to say this. I'm actually picking up from, I saw a cool video with one of the top physicists in the world. He's right up there with Stephen Hawking. His name's Roger Penrose. It's just a basic question. How much does the number 7 weigh? Or what about other mathematical truths, like the fact that the number 7 is a set containing, a certain number of... How much does the number 7 weigh? How much, what about mathematical truths in general, like that 4 plus 4 doesn't make JELLO, even though Bill Cosby wants us to think so, but that it makes 8? Or what about logical truths? That like a thing is what it is not what it is not? That's really all we have to say, but we can go into more detail. But like, the question is, how much does the number 7 weigh? Because you think about it, like, wait a minute. It's not a physical entity. Mathematical and logical truths are non-physical. How much does the number 7 weigh? So, are they just descriptions of the physical? Nope. Because we can tell that they have necessary truth. They cannot fail to be true. Like the fact that 2 plus 2 equals 4, it cannot fail to be true. Which means that even if the physical did not exist, it would still be true. That 2 plus 2 equals 4. Ruh-roh. Well, maybe they're just concepts that we created. But the problem is that 2 plus 2 would still make 4 whether we believed it did or it didn't. It has a necessary existence. And physical reality must correspond to these truths. Therefore, they must have some non-physical, but still very mysterious existence. And actually, it's more certain than the physical, because the physical, there's always a question of illusion, like, like in the Matrix, the robots hooked wires to people's brains and made them see a reality, but it was really just false sensory input, and they were just really just laying in a vat of jello. So, like, alright, how do I know the physical world exists, or what if everything I'm seeing is an illusion? But these mathematical and philosophical truths, like, they can't. They have their whatever existence they have. It's super mysterious, but they have to exist on some level. And that's not really all that different from the physical in a sense, because we don't really know what all of the properties of the physical either. We don't really know what matter is. We're still trying to understand quantum gravity and all kinds of things that go on at the quantum level. Quantum mechanics, we don't really know. So, there you have it. How much does the number 7 weigh? And this leads directly into a contingency argument for God. You see, in other words, like, you could ground these philosophical and mathematical truths in the mind of God. Now, the early Platonists, they believed in a world of Platonic forms. Aristotle came to believe, and the philosophers came to believe in some sort of ultimate God. And they became philosophical monotheists because of the first cause argument. But St. Augustine, Christian early church father, he argued that these truths were grounded in the mind of God. Although Augustine, in his epistemological approach, so it's important to understand, in ancient Greek times there was a big push and pull between empirical versus rational. In other words, purely logical truths versus like observation of physical reality truths. And so you had different schools of thought there. I know that the Epicureans were in the empirical side, and I know that the Stoics were born from a guy who was a student of the Epicureans named Zeno, who rejected Epicureanism and he formed Stoicism. And these were the two major schools of thought, and they both came out of Aristotle and Plato. And of course Aristotle and Plato were still massively influential, but like, my point is, I don't know if the Stoics were in the rational side. And of course there were still Platonists. They were still around. And the Platonists certainly would have been heavier in the rational side. But like, the point is, Augustine, I just want to make this point. Augustine also, he argued, the Christians, when they came from, Augustine like came along right at the time of the fall of the Roman Empire, and from his time up until the ending, I guess, of the early Middle Ages, with Aquinas, the Christians really tried to resolve this debate, and they really felt like they did, between observational knowledge versus rational knowledge. So that's something they took on very seriously, and they favored using observational knowledge because they felt like God created the physical world. So you're observing God's creation. Anyways, that's way off topic, but like, as if that matters in this video. But the contingency argument for the existence of God isn't that far from this question of Platonic things. So like, there you have it. I mean, the contingency argument is just that you could, let's say I'll use William Lane Craig's way of explaining it. I don't know where he got it from, but he says, you're walking through the woods and you see a ball. Okay, you would immediately understand that the existence of that ball right there in those woods is not necessary. That like, it didn't have to be there, and you could even move it. So like, there's no reason, if you just make the ball 10 feet in diameter, there's no reason to say that like it has to be there. If you make it 20 feet in diameter, there's no reason to say that it has to be there, that it has necessary existence. And you could expand it out till it's as big as the whole universe, and you say, yeah, just because I made it larger in diameter, there's no reason that it has to exist. It could theoretically not exist. Or we can imagine really, you could think of it a different way. Maybe this is my own way of thinking of it. You could think of it in terms of possible worlds. Like our universe that exists, it doesn't have to exist because a very different universe could exist where things are very different, and there's no logical reason why that's impossible. So in other words, like if you have a painting on your wall in a location A, there could be a possibly different universe where the painting is in a location B on your wall, and there's no reason that universe can't exist. And in fact, the universe constantly changes, does it not? And so, in a way, we're constantly moving to a totally different universe. And so the fact that our universe constantly changes means that it doesn't have necessary existence. And so the argument would be like that, well, a thing that doesn't have to exist has to be in other words, anything that exists has to have an explanation of its existence. And this is called the principle of sufficient reason, that for anything that happens there has to be a sufficient explanation for why it happens, for why it exists. So let's see. You could say that a thing exists without an explanation, but you run into huge problems when you say that, because that would mean that like things happen for no reason at all, or exist for no reason at all. And then, in other words, like that would mean if you come in your house and you find that like all of your stuff is gone and there's turds all over the wall, that could have happened for no reason at all. And you'd probably think, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, if you believed in the superstition and magic we talked about, that would be more ridiculous than the superstition and the magic, because at least you have some sort of magical explanation. But with nothing being the explanation, then it's just nothing, and like anything can happen for no reason at all. I mean, at least there's some rules to magic. There's no rules for nothing. It's just nothing. Why that happened? Nothing. That's why it happened. Nothing at all. Nothing. Dumb. That's dumb. Okay. I can make a further argument about things happening for no reason at all, because if things could happen for no reason at all, then an unstoppable force could emerge into existence for no reason at all, because there's nothing logically impossible about it existing, and an immovable object could emerge into existence for no reason at all, and they could meet for no reason at all. And an unstoppable force and an immovable object logically cannot meet. But the thing is, they can exist. So anyway, that's the point with that argument. There's no reason they couldn't meet one another. So I don't know. I'd be interested to see if someone would say that, like, well, there's something in the fact that they can't meet means that they can't emerge. But I don't see that. There's nothing inherently wrong with them existing. And so what I would argue is there has to be some sort of something that prevents them from emerging. Another way you could look at it is you could say, like, well, could two all-powerful beings come into existence? Or would the mere existence of one preclude the existence of another? No. As long as they totally agreed. Anyways. Maybe that one requires some more thought, even though I made a video on it. It's not the most knocked down argument, but I think it's a good argument. Okay, another defense of the supernatural would be these flaws of reductionism. So reductionism is the idea that you don't use your brain, you are your brain. You have no soul, you have no non-physical mind, you just are a physical brain. So when you say that, like, you love somebody, you're really saying, I'm having a chemical reaction right now. And, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's the idea. So, chemical reactions don't have free will. They can be complicated, but they just react based on their inherent chemical properties. So the question is, do you have free will? Well, if you do, I would argue that you know that you do. In other words, that it's basic in the most proper sense, or that it's properly basic knowledge, the fact that you make choices. Furthermore, you can't have knowledge without freedom of the will. So, In other words, like, if you don't choose what you believe to be true, if you don't have free will, then you don't have control over your beliefs. So how do you know if your beliefs are true? Your beliefs could be untrue. Well, that means that, like, the fact that when you say, this is a way to demonstrate the properly basic nature of it. Let's say I told you that I'm a married bachelor. Well, you would immediately say, that's irrational and impossible. Well, you can't. That in other words, like, the fact that you say that means that you're denying. You are claiming that you have a soul. Like, there's no way around that. You can't know that. You can't have that knowledge that irrational concepts can't be true without the existence of a soul. Let's see. Concepts of good and bad cannot be generated by physical processes. So I got another argument for you. But to just sum it up in general, a biological machine, so hopefully we're at the point where you understand a biological machine, can evolve to have a goal. In other words, like, you could build a machine that goes and does things, and if something gets in the way, then it, like, corrects and, like, still tries to achieve the goal. But it cannot value that goal. It could recalculate and continue to try to achieve it, but it cannot say this goal is good. How do you know this, Ben? Well, here's the logical truth. You can't be programmed to not be programmed. That's impossible. Like, that's a self-contradictory idea that I am not programmed because I was programmed that way. That's a self-contradictory idea. So that's impossible. You can't, that's ironclad. That's iron. Solid iron. Alright. The value of being good or evil is a goal of not being programmed. Okay? So in other words, if you say I want to be good instead of evil, then you, or even if you say I want to be bad, your goal is still to not be programmed, because you are not evil or good if you are totally under the control of another. So the belief in you being evil or good is in other words, if I want to be good, like, then your goal is I want to be not programmed. Okay? And so the pursuit of not being programmed is already an instance of being unprogrammed. If you pursue being unprogrammed, then you already are unprogrammed. In other words, you can't be programmed to have a goal of not being programmed, because that would already be not being programmed. How do you program something with a goal of not being programmed? That's just the same as being programmed to not be programmed. You shall pursue not doing what I say because I say so. And good and evil is not good and evil unless if it's just something that's caused by someone else. You're not good or evil if someone else is responsible for what you do. If you're just a puppet purely in the hands of someone else, In other words, like, if I kill you with my hand, then you don't blame my hand, you blame me, because the hand has no control in the matter. It's just a machine that was programmed. It's not an evil hand. Okay? Maybe you could get superstitious. Alright. And finally, where are we? I would say many of our strongly held values cannot be defended and would have to be forsaken. And we talked about this already before, but the concepts of individual liberty and these whole utilitarian ideas, like, we are opposed to that. These are our strongly held values, but we can't defend them without referencing the supernatural, really God. So, like, utilitarianism, we could take it further than where the Nazis took it with, like, and when I talked about individual liberty and that kind of thing, but, like, Peter Singer is a philosopher in America, I think, and, like, he says that, like, we should just kill Down syndrome babies because they don't have much value to society. They don't provide much. So, like, the ends justify the means. Society would be, we would probably eliminate a lot of poverty if we just killed off these people. Here's another argument I had never made before, I think. Slavery. Slavery. We all strongly hold the belief that slavery is bad. But, without a reference to the supernatural, you cannot have a problem with slavery. You can't defend your anti-slavery position. So you could say, well, I have a problem with slavery because of human equality. and all humans are equal, and even the Romans, the pre-Christian Romans believed in human equality. Well, that's true. Cicero is, I think, the first ever we know of who ever said that, and he lived about the time when Jesus was born, and when Julius Caesar just took, Julius Caesar too, and blah, 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 not important. But, anyway, the problem is, well, first of all, the philosophers of that day and age, they were monotheists, but they weren't Christians. But so that they were still referencing monotheism. But human equality, humans aren't really equal. They are equal to some degree, but not ultimately equal. So you can't really defend 100% all humans are exactly the same. So if you say that all humans are exactly the same, therefore they have to be treated the same, the problem is some people think it's a good idea to build bombs and blow up kindergartens, and some people think that's a bad idea. So, are you really going to say that those two groups of people are the same? No, they're not the same. That's a difference. So, we're similar. I mean, we have to all be the same in some ways, otherwise we wouldn't all be humans. And that's what the Roman philosopher is talking about. He's saying, what the thing that separates us from animals is our ability to reason and higher thought. But anyway, you can't get rid of slavery based on human equality, and Cicero didn't go there. In fact, he said the worst form of government was democracy, and the Roman society was fundamentally slave-based economy. But now you could just out of the blue just say, I have a rule that says you can't force people to do something they don't want to do, which you would have to justify that. I mean, that's just begging the question. Are you gonna? That's just baseless. You have to give reason why we should agree with you. But let's say that you do that. Well, still, that's a problem because, there's actually a reason not to do that. In other words, we don't have to agree with you because you've given no reason for it. But actually, there's counter arguments against it. That would mean total anarchy. You can't have law and order without forcing people to do things they don't want to do. So, the question becomes, well then, what's your problem with slavery? All people aren't equal. And it's okay nobody can live life with no restrictions. Sometimes you have to make people do stuff. So why not do slavery? And now, me saying that, I bet you're out there and you're thinking well, I guess Ben really is pro-slavery. No. But I'm making the point that how do you really have a problem with slavery? The only way you can have a problem with slavery is the way the Christians preached against it from the get-go, is you have to say that humans are of such a high value that they cannot be owned. That humans have infinite value. And the argument from Gregory of Nyssa was that humans are made in God's image, and therefore what would you pay for an image of God? What would be a legitimate price? Honestly. There is no price. There is no price. You can set on that, so you can't own people. That's really the distinction. Because you can't say all people are the same, and so therefore all people shouldn't be treated the same. That's ridiculous. And you can't say that it's wrong to force people to do stuff against their will, because you totally have to do that. But what you can say when it comes to slavery is you can't own a human being, because human beings are too expensive. They're priceless. Now, you could say, alright, I'm gonna say that, you can't own a human being because of my atheist reasons. Well, what atheist reasons? Honestly, what? If you're gonna pull it just out of the air, or you're gonna have some some basis for this. And, all you can say is, ooh, scratching my foot. Well, look at all of the wonderful things humans have achieved. So maybe humans don't have infinite value because you can't reference the infinite because you don't believe in God if you're an atheist. So nothing could have infinite value, which is a sad thing from an atheist perspective. There is nothing of ultimate greatness, maximal greatness, because that would have to be God. So everything's of gay, lameness. It has to be. It has to be. There's nothing that's really a thing. Life would ultimately be living for something that's kind of meh. Because at the end of the day, there would be a limit to how awesome, the level of awesomeness and wonder and majesty and greatness. unless you have a thing of infinite value. And if you have no thing of infinite value, then the only reason you're excited right now is because you're just a little kid who's just like, you found something new to you. But one day, that they do this in the Superman comic book. They say, what about like billions and billions and years in the future where humans are essentially, they figured out everything there is to figure out and they're just bored. There's nothing greater out there. Because like, the only way you can have a thing of infinite value would be God, a thing of infinite greatness. You worship that thing. So, this is the problem with atheism, I guess. It's just, ultimately, is boring. This is the argument they can make against slavery. They could say humans possess not infinite value, but great value. And you say, well, what do you base that on? Well, look at all the great things that humans have achieved. There are various humans who have lived over the years, and so therefore humans have great potential. And you could say that because each human has such great potential, then humans have great value. Aha! I have an atheist argument to defeat slavery, so blah blah blah, you were wrong, man. Nope. Nope. There's a problem with this. Is a human who actualizes his potential more valuable? Or is just the act of actualizing your potential more valuable? It has to be. It has to be, because that's the whole basis for the potential value in the first place. So then, you have to make probability assessments. You're going to have to make some probability assessments. Alright, yeah, this guy's got a lot of potential, but honestly, really, what's he going to do? Because that potential is not as valuable as the actual, so it's really going to be about what he actually does. And so, how valuable is this guy really? Well, it's going to be based on what he actually can do. And so then you're going to wind up with, these people are more valuable than others, and you're going to wind up with slavery's legal. And so, on the basis of that, you can't atheistically have a problem with slavery. Now, beyond all this, there are arguments for the existence of God, and God would be supernatural. So I've got videos on that. I got videos on the moral argument for the existence of God. I've got videos on the Kalam argument for the existence of God, or like first cause arguments. But I'm going to stop there. Enjoy your life.